Hello, how are you? I just wanted to start our last unit in the syllabus. It's Unit 5, and it's also connected to the use of tones in English, the same repertoire that we studied in Unit 4, the 5-tone repertoire proposed by David Brazil. Now we are going to study other functions of intonation through tones, aside from information structuring. Information structuring was the value or function of intonation that we studied in Unit 4. Now we are going to study two more functions or values which can be put together in the term interpersonal relations. This means that we are going to study two functions that have to do with the relationship and with the power that we find in oral communication in English. For this description, Brazil proposes two values. The first one is called the social value, and the second one is the role relationship. So we have two values, social value and role relationship. As you can see on the screen, I've included this diagram, which I find very useful. It belongs to a survey conducted with university students in the 80s, where students explained what they preferred from their teachers. These are attitudes that have been very much analyzed within the field of social linguistics and interactional linguistics, meaning the sort of language that we use in different situations. And this is organized along two axes, en dos ejes, a vertical one and a horizontal one. You may have heard also of Deborah Tannen. Deborah Tannen is another author, a very well-known author in the field of social linguistics. She talked about the power and solidarity metaphor. This survey is based on that metaphor proposed by Deborah Tannen, and also David Brazil in his model of 1985, which is of the same year as this model. They all use the three authors. Well, this is a group of authors in this diagram. It's Woebels, Criton, and Woemeyer or something like that, because it's very difficult to pronounce. It's a Dutch name, Woemeyer. So they are three contemporary linguists working in the mid-80s of the last century, talking about the same thing, about these two axes, dominance and non-dominance, and proximity and distance. I'm saying different words. It's not because I cannot read these words, but I'm using the terminology proposed by David Brazil. He talks about dominance and non-dominance instead of submission, and then he talks about proximity and distance, yes, instead of cooperation and opposition. So, the social value of intonation that Brazil describes has to do with this axis, with opposition and cooperation, or distance and proximity. Okay? For David Brazil, tones that show proximity are the referring tones, either referring falling rising or referring plus. Why? Because this is very closely related to the previous value that we analyzed in Unit 4 with information value. If we consider that we have common ground with the speaker, it means that we are close to them, so it shows proximity. Remember the Venn diagram, the famous Venn diagram like this? Okay, sorry. You have a shaded area in between that shows more proximity with your listener or listeners, all right? So, rising tones convey at the same time given information, which is the information value, and they also convey proximity or cooperation, according to these authors. On the opposite end, we have tones that convey distance or opposition, and we have the rest of the repertoire, that is to say, falling tones, either proclaiming, P, or P+, which is a rising falling tone, but you know that you have to pay attention to the second part of the tone. So P+ is a falling tone, is a proclaiming tone. Is this clear? Distance means that the Venn diagram doesn't touch. There is no shaded area in between the speaker and the listeners. So the distance is broader. Falling tones then convey two values at the same time. They convey new information and they convey distance. And repeating information, as typical of teacher talk, we can say that again, so that this is more easily memorized. Rising tones convey given information and proximity. Is that clear? Well, I hope so. I don't have you here to reply to my making sure question. Okay, that's a topic we saw in Unit 4. Now, in Unit 5, we include, as I told you, two values. This is the social value, proximity and distance. Proximity with rising tones, distance with falling tones. Also distance, I would like to mention that the level tone, the one that is symbolized with a small o between square brackets, is also used for opposition or distance. Why distance? Because if you remember the concept of oblique orientation is typically signaled by falling tones and level tones, because those are the tones that we use when we are connecting with the text, not with the audience. So it means that we are distant to the audience. Falling tones then and level tones are here, rising tones are here, right? Now, you may be wondering why Brazil includes this issue of the plus tones, proclaiming plus and referring plus. Well, this has to do with this other axis that is connected with the role relation that Brazil describes. That's the third value. So, to refresh values, we have three values. Information value, we saw in Unit 4. We have the social value, proximity and distance. We are studying it in Unit 5. And now we are also studying this third value, which is the signaling of role relationship in the axis going or ranging from dominance to non-dominance or submission. All right, you have this diagram in a larger size at the end of the grid that you are studying, where you are studying listening and theoretical contents of this subject. Okay, so I very much insist on you going there, because you will be able to read what is expected from teachers in teacher talk. Unfortunately, I don't have a similar survey for paper presentations, but I think I have the feeling that it might be very similar in as much as expectations from audiences is concerned. All right. So I will be uploading a handwritten note, because you know I don't have a whiteboard at home, with the tones that you normally would find in this diagram. Because in dominant tones you have the plus tones. So you have P plus and R plus, proclaiming plus and referring plus are tones typically used by dominant speakers, whereas non-dominant speakers use non-plus tones, that is to say, proclaiming, referring, and level. Dominant speakers may use the plus tones, that is to say P plus and R plus, but they can use the whole repertoire. It means that they have all the 5 tones available to their dominant role. Power means having more choices in this respect, whereas the non-dominant speakers, such as students, they normally use P or falling, referring, that is to say referring, falling, rising, or level when they hesitate. Is that clear? So these 2 areas are much more related to oblique orientation, if you come to think about it. Distance and non-dominance is oblique, whereas cooperation and dominance, this other quarter, I would say, of this octagon, I think it's the shape octagon, this area of the octagon from dominance to proximity is more related to direct orientation. And as I told you in a previous posting, this is what university students expect from their teachers, to be leaders and to be friendly. Which tone contributes to dominance and cooperation? It's the referring plus. Remember that we have here referring and referring plus, the rising tones, and here we have the plus. But this will be more clear with my handwritten post in a photo that I will upload in a moment in the Facebook group, and I will ask a volunteer to pass this into a Word file. All right? So I know this is a kind of abstract, but it's also amazing what you can do with your tones and how you can manage power relations in classroom interaction and in paper presentations. If you have any doubts, or if someone is willing to transcribe what I'm saying and upload a summary, a word summary of my words, polishing them, of course, because I'm improvising, maybe this will be helpful for classmates to be shared, and also for the transcriber will be a cognitive exercise to retain all this information that I'm offering. You have to read some theory and do some exercises in your handout from page 118 till the end of the handout, which is 139. All right? I will also be writing down these numbers, page numbers, in my next posting, okay? So take care, and we'll be in touch.